Ang Firewalls at Dusk, Confessions by Patch Window. My name is Micah, and I am paid to listen for teeth in the dark. I'm the overnight incident responder in a glass box 2 floors above a river, a security operations center that pretends night is a solvable math problem. Dashboards, threat intel feeds, pagers that chirp like guilty birds. On paper, I triage alerts, pull packet captures, write postmortems polite enough to pass legal review. In practice, I translate appetite. Engineers want velocity with plausible deniability. Executives want risk reported in colors. Attackers want curiosity with an open port. I carry a YubiKey on a lanyard that knows my pulse, a notebook with timestamps and coffee rings, and a little rubber duck I squeeze when the job pretends to be a game. I live with Rowan. He builds furniture with his hands and books with his mouth. By day, he runs a tiny workshop that smells like cedar and good stubbornness. At night, he reads me short paragraphs. He loves the way some people pass you photographs of their childhood homes. He stores burn gel next to the olive oil and kisses my temple like a promise has measurable units. We keep a rule on an index card underneath a magnet shaped like a lock icon. Say it by Patch Window. Tuesdays at 06:00, we push updates and reboot what the world leaned on overnight. We learned the hard way that midnight honesty turns into theater and noon turns into litigation. Patches are the closest thing we have to grace. The night the IDS behaved and I didn't, the city felt like it had been poured into its clothes still warm. A cryptojacking campaign had died at the firewall. A phishing wave had learned not to talk about gift cards. A partner firm insisted their S3 bucket was definitely private because the URL was hard to guess. At 01:47, an API gateway hiccuped. At 02:19, a container forgot how to believe in TLS. At 03:32, I taught a junior analyst how to write a rule that catches ambition and not just noise. At 04:53, my pocket lit with the joint email Rowan and I use for deliveries, dentist appointments, and emergency nouns. Thank you for your stay, the Halberd. Time, 12:083:02. Points, 200 added. Patch Window sat up in my chest and asked whether I was about to audition for a story I'd have to own. I didn't call him. Our second rule covers everything not yet a disaster, 2 loops around the server room before nomming it. I walked past racks that purred like cats that have never forgiven you, past the emergency shutoff behind break glass, past the laminated poster that says security is everyone's job and somehow means no one. The air tasted like static. The building said the sentence fluorescent lights prefer. You already know. He introduced himself like a solution that wanted applause. Vale, he said, last name first, then Elias, incident response consultant, and slid a temporary badge across my desk the way men slide rooms across nights. His firm had been hired to battle-harden our processes, which is how money asks to sit somewhere expensive. He was the kind of man who wears navy like a weapon and smiles like he's paid per secret. He stood behind my chair while I marked an alert as benign and watched my screen like it owed him rent. You keep the noise obedient, he said. I keep the noise from winning, I answered, and saved a rule with a name I would regret. Micah CARES too much 042. When you drop a host from the network, do you feel it? He asked, and leaned in just far enough that his breath chose my ear. I hear it, I said, in a place between shoulder blades and discipline. He laughed as if I'd given him permission. Drink after Patch Window, he asked. The Halberd Bar is very good at forgiving men who pretend they did not see the future coming. Rowan texted a photo of walnut shavings on his shop floor, a curl of light like a comma you can hold. 2 burns, 1 language lesson from a stubborn dovetail. I'll be home by 6. Say it by patch window. I typed a heart and the lock emoji and meant both. Then a line on my dashboard turned the shade of red that knows my hands, and I thought briefly about the elevator at the Halberd and what its button felt like after midnight. The Halberd bar exists to make receipts look like repairs. Elias sat where the lamp taught cheekbones how to ask for second chances. He wanted to know what it feels like to freeze a process halfway through sin. I told him it feels like taking a cigarette out of somebody's mouth and watching relief arrive already angry. He touched the back of my hand with 2 fingers like a blue teamer testing ground and asked, "Here," with his eyebrows. I said now, because sometimes even incident responders turn off auto-remediation and trust the manual path. His sweet smelled like citrus and a carpet consultant. He kissed like a man who had been applauded for restraint and decided to audition hunger. He pressed me against the window, and the river below pretended it had never seen anything worth repeating. He was generous in places biography trains men to be, selfish where a mouth remembers that ethics can wait. I put my hands where agreements live. We left the lamp on because daylight had been added to the terms in the lobby when he pronounced my name like a password. After he lay on his stomach and watched a glass of water confess to the nightstand. "You'll forgive him," he said, meaning Rowan, meaning the part of me that believes wood is a more honest material than code. "I'll speak by patch window," I said, and he smiled like the clause had been invented just for him. Rowan was brewing coffee when I came in, hair sweet with dust, wrist wrapped in a strip of gauze that looked almost ceremonial. At 0600 we stood beneath the lock magnet and I told him nouns. Hotel, elevator, mouth, hands, yes. I didn't attempt adjectives that thought they could do more than verbs. He listened like a man who has caught falling things that didn't want to be caught. "Do you love him?" he asked, voice steady enough to build a shelf on it. "I loved the hour where nothing needed permission," I said. He nodded, picked up the marker, and wrote under our rule in his workshop block letters. "No rooms we can't name at this table. If anything breaks, we break it before sundown together." He underlined together twice, then put his palm against my throat with the softness of someone who knows what hands are for. He waited. I said yes. We left the lamp on because daylight had been invited and we were not going to embarrass it. Elias did not behave like a man collecting a single night. He hovered beside my chair during a tabletop exercise and slipped ideas across the console like tips. He sent me a picture of the Soch at dawn with the caption "proof," as if glass needed corroboration. He learned the names of 2 juniors and said them like keys. He asked if our detection strategy could be reframed as narrative integrity for the board deck, and I told him nouns don't enjoy being turned into candles. The gossip vertical that harvests our industry posted a grainy Halberd elevator still. My shoulder, his mouth, a caption that thought zero trust made a clever joke. Rowan didn't forward it. He printed it, taped it inside the cabinet where we keep salt, and took it down at patch window to make room for a list. Lemons, bandages, sandpaper, mercy. This is how he archives. Nothing heavy at reach. Props love our work because our work pretends to be invisible. Housekeeping at the Halberd called to say they'd found a narrow gold ring under a chair in a room tied to the email I use when I don't want receipts to talk to my phone. Engraved E+M on the inside like arithmetic attempting to declare a law. Not mine. The clerk asked whether I wanted to claim it. "Hold for owner," I said with the voice I use when telling a colonel what it's not allowed to do anymore. Work tried to rescue me with decent enemies. A vendor shipped an update that broke logging, which is how you apologize with silence. A honeypot caught a scanner wearing yesterday's costume. A developer pushed debug flags to production and then learned to blush. I wrote an incident report where the only adjective was reproducible. Elias texted, "You are very good when the room is afraid." I typed, "I prefer accurate," and did not send it. Then a little red badge appeared on a tab where red should not exist. A workstation in finance began making small talk with an IP we don't date. I pivoted to EDR and saw a process spawn chain I would have bet rent against, then watched the payload try to write itself into a place our rules consider religious. We killed it, quarantined the host, pulled a memory image, and took a breath. During the sweep that followed, a junior flagged an odd device in a conference room, thumb-sized, taped under the lip of the table like a joke that needed batteries. It was a keystroke logger, cheap and patient, its tiny light a private confession. The sticker on its battery pack belonged to a firm hired by Brand Experience to enhance visitor engagement during an upcoming leadership offsite. Elias had mentioned them over whiskey, as if saying a name creates plausible deniability. I peeled the logger off with a plastic scraper, gloved because rumor is an oil you can't wash out. Legal wrote a memo with "regrettable" 4 times and "consent" twice. We printed signs in sans serif that refused to be fun. Recording devices prohibited. External hardware by authorization only. We added a line to the red teaming charter that says we don't teach bad theology to people who already want to believe. I told Rowan at Patch Window. He set a mug in front of me the way you set a brace under a board. "Are we being interesting, Micah?" he asked. "Or are we being us?" He asks it with the patience of clamps. "Us," I said, "because sometimes the truest thing is the least narratable." Elias tried an ending he'd practiced for more obedient audiences. He waited for me by the halberd's valet stand with the ring between his fingers, E+M glittering like a dare, and said, "Say my name." He meant Elias and also the other thing men mean when they want jurisdiction of your mouth. "Elias," I said, because facts deserve pronunciation. Then I added exit. He pocketed the ring with a smile people mistake for kindness and said, "You're precise." I told him, "I prefer accurate." He laughed like I'd borrowed the line from him, and went upstairs to invoice closure. "If you came for erotics notarized, here is my entire inventory." There was a wall and a yes and hands where we said they would be, a mouth that believed in the moment more than the man. The lamp stayed on because daylight had been added to the contract. We didn't ask it to officiate. It was heat without metaphor, a brief hour where the body edits the head and ships it without review. If you came for intrigue plated with garnish, there was a ring with arithmetic pretending to be the law, a keystroke logger taped under a table that should have hosted only apologies, an elevator camera that thinks it's in features, a consultant who confuses narrative with architecture. If you came for redemption, security doesn't sell it. We sell detection with a handshake and prevention when the world isn't looking. The logger turned into a policy that turned into a decal on every door to the executive floor. The experience firm was dismissed by a paragraph that used the word values like a coaster. We started sweeping rooms before meetings the way you sweep sawdust before stain. The board asked for a presentation titled Lessons Learned, and I titled my deck Things We Should Have Already Known. Rowan came to the office once with a sandwich and left with a smile like a splinter he'd chosen to keep. The ring's other initial turned into a man with cufflinks. Carter, there is always a Carter, arrived with a lawyer whose kindness had passed committee and retrieved the band as if it were a cousin prone to drama. He nodded at me in a lobby where orchids practice good behavior, and I nodded back with the universal face that says this story can leave without us. Rowan and I practiced boring until we remembered it was a craft. One night in the kitchen he put his hand at my throat with the kind of pressure that is a question and a promise and asked here. I said now, because consent likes clocks. After, he laughed into my shoulder like he'd found a knot he could finally name. We ate toast with butter that decided to be generous all at once. The lamp stayed on. Work stayed work. A compliance audit knocked like a landlord. I opened the door and made it tea. A junior found beauty in a packet capture, and I wrote their name into the shift notes like a benediction. An attacker tried to pivot through a host that had learned to refuse in 5 languages. I updated the runbooks with a sentence that will outlive any of us. Ask who benefits if this alarm is ignored. Sometimes at 03:00, I stand with my palms on the glass and look down at the river like it remembers. The city hums, the dashboards breathe, the clock on the wall pretends time is agreed upon. I think of my father's old toolbox and how he said measure twice means respect, not paranoia. I think of the index card on our fridge and how paper needs breath. I think of the little rubber duck on my desk, and how, in this job, explaining a thing out loud is sometimes how you learn you knew it already. We added a line to our rule because rules enjoy company. In Rowan's patient block letters, if you burn something, do it where I can help find water. We didn't laminate it. The magnet holds. Elias will find another soch to haunt, another elevator to rehearse sincerity in, another ring to engrave with arithmetic that thinks it can make nouns behave. I will keep a YubiKey around my neck and a notebook open to the page where I wrote you already know. For a few hours at a time, I keep teeth out of the dark. For a few hours at a time, I say yes to the right alarms and no to stories that only want to rent my mouth. Then I go home at dawn if the river lets me, to a workshop that smells like arguments I trust. We stand under a little lock and say the thing. We leave the lamp on or off as needed. And when the dashboard decides to audition for tragedy, I breathe. I put my finger on the right line, and I tell the network gently to keep its promises.